Good afternoon, and welcome to the wrap-up session of the 2019 Vision Europe Dialogue. And we have with us a large panel representing all the partner organizations of the Vision Europe Dialogue, and we're going to have a chance to go through 3 questions. First of all, I'm going to ask all of our panelists to tell us something interesting that they've learned here today that they're going to take home. It can be a big thought, but it can also be a small thought. Second, I'm going to ask them to think about the format, because while we've been talking about the fair data economy and hard policy questions, we've also been experimenting with a new way of debate and discussion. And that's part of the business of think tanks, is to come up with new ways of coming up with ideas. Finally, I'm going to ask them not just an idea, but something they plan to do, an action when they get home to act on the ideas we've had here today. And if we have time, we'll have a 4th bonus question, but it'll be a surprise what that is. So, the first question is, what are you going to take back home with you? And we're going to start with Sebastien Maillard of the Jacques Delors Institute.
Thank you. What am I going to take home with me? There have been many ideas that are all over those 48 hours. 2 things coming to my mind. In EU we have lots of acronyms, and there's a new acronym I discovered this morning listening to Mikko was, I think it's we call it IHAN, like IBAN. There's this IHAN concept that each individual would get its IHAN, and this could be developed in a secured manner throughout the EU. I think it's a concept that really would need more depth, but I think there's something that can be done. I think I found very challenging. And the second thing is was one in the group I participated in was the when we talk about fair data, the public sector has a special role to play as to lead by example, or at least to raise standards to the top. And when it comes to public procurement, the fact that it is done in a way that the one who tender have to apply to the GDPR, of course, and to the way they handle data, I think that could be also a good implementation of a fair data economy.
Thank you. Aart Geus of the Bertelsmann Foundation.
Yeah, thank you. I wanted to say the same, the IHAN, and to understand that I learned that we have the IBAN, which is the International Bank Account Number. Now, if you think that IHAN is almost the same, so also an international account number, but then not for bank, but for human data. And this is a terrific idea, and it is based on the fact that the GDPR, the new regulation that Europe is giving all its citizens, gives the right to decide yourself to whom you give access to your data. So if you have that right, and to execute that right, the implementation of that, therefore the IHAN can be a terrific idea.
Excellent. Filippo Candela of the Collegio Sao Paolo.
Thank you. Okay, in our case, we will take home the ethical implication of a fair data economy. So the starting point of the paper was something really practical among the ecosystem of fair data economy, but then during these 2 days, the topics about ethics in the use of data, even in the case of our foundation that is a non-profit foundation, has risen significantly. This is something very important that we have to take taken into account for our work.
Excellent, thank you. So next we have Barbara Rosa Santos of the Gulbenkian Foundation.
Thanks. I agree with the first 2 panelists. So I'll take home definitely this IHAN idea and the transposition to an international account number. And the second thing is the complete shift of paradigm. That I can't still myself, as a new learner of these issues, I can still entirely envision, but I'm sure that it will make a big change nearby and in the future.
Izabela Styczynska of the Case Foundation.
Thank you. So first of all, I have to admit that I was very much impressed by the visionary character of this of the event, and this is what impressed me the most during the last 2 days. what I will take home is the fact that here, as a think tank leaders, we don't have to discuss issues which are on the first pages of the newspapers and in media and discussions before the election, but we are touching issues which are like long-lasting and long-term, and which affect long-term problems. So thanks.
Thomas Rains of Chatham House.
Thank you very much. So we had a really rich set of discussions, and one of the ideas that I took away was we were discussing this concept of consent and how can we make consent more meaningful and not seem sort of artificial. And one sort of idea that came out of that discussion was a system of ratings or certifications for organizations and for websites for how they use data and how they address issues of privacy. So in the same way that you have a star rating for a hotel or a hygiene rating for a restaurant, you could have a privacy rating for a website, and that would give consumers much better and clear, simple ideas about how different organizations or websites use their data.
Scott Marcus of Bruegel.
Well, Tom and I were in the same panel, and I would have many of the same comments. It seems to me that a key set of issues that I came away with is that GDPR really does pretty nearly everything that's needed at a regulatory level. None of our discussions were about new regulation. All of them focused on mechanisms to make the existing regulation more effective. And they typically focused on a more active role for NGOs, for citizen participation, self-regulatory or co-regulatory schemes. That's where these issues of certification came in. So it's really not so much at this point a question of tightening up the regulation, but rather of making it into an effective tool that really serves citizen needs.
So Jaana, Sinipuro, Sitra has been hosting this discussion, and you've really put the idea of a fair data economy on the table. That's clear from these comments and over the last day and a half that the think tanks you've brought together here see a lot of value in this vision and have had some concrete ideas on how to carry it forward. But I want to ask you, what have you learned in feedback from the think tanks we've assembled here and all of our participants about how to improve the fair data economy concept that you put on the table?
I think that one of the good notions was that there's actually a quite broad common value base between the EU and the US. So collaboration could be the model to work on the principle side and on the standardization side. So I really like this Alex Stubb's keynote there, starting with those value bases. But then this idea also Europe being this regulative superpower. And I like the idea of promoting that, like saying, let's have the smartest regulators in the world. So let's make lawyers great again. That's a great message from this 2 days or 1 day.
Well, I like this point about collaboration. And I think this brings us to a question that always bedevils think tanks, which is that we aim to be not just think tanks, but also to some extent do tanks, either through our own actions or through the actions that we impel and inspire others to undertake. So beyond just asking what ideas you take home, I also want to ask, what actions do you take home? When you get back tonight, tomorrow, maybe you have a day to reflect, what are you going to start doing to carry some of these ideas forward? And I'm going to start this time with Scott, and I am going to give you, Jaana, the privilege of tying this together, because I also want to ask you again, what is Sitra going to do differently? So Scott, what can we do?
Well, there's a challenge, isn't it? It seems to me that obviously the do things would flow exactly from my comments before. What can really be done in terms of citizen engagement? What can be done in terms of, for example, trust marks for privacy? How can we get beyond the idea of simply check boxes? Yes, I'm fine with cookies. Yes, I'm fine with this approach to privacy. And if I don't check it off, I can't get into the service. So one of the more promising approaches that I heard actually came from one of our panelists who's active with the IEEE, really a reverse kind of certification scheme where people indicate what kinds of privacy, what kinds of personally identifiable information they're willing to give up. I think I'm going to want to get smarter about that. I'm an IEEE member myself, and it seems to me, though, that this notion of opportunities for engagement to enhance the effectiveness of the rules we already have is a very promising one.
Thomas?
Well, I think my starting point will be to try to connect these discussions and these ideas to some other work that we're doing at Chatham House. We have a big project at the moment which is looking at democracy and technological change, and that really was my starting point coming to this event, was to think about how do these ideas about data and wider kind of issues about technology, how do they plug into the way that democratic politics is changing. And we have a project at the moment trying to kind of think how can we use technology to reinvigorate democracy and be aware of and sort of prepare for the different risks and challenges that disruptive technologies could have. So my task, I think, is to plug in all these ideas and discussions into that work that we're doing.
Izabela?
Okay, so actually this morning with my Polish colleagues, we discussed what we should bring to Poland after this meeting, and we came up with a couple of points. The first one was to start convincing our policymakers and also Polish citizens to stop talking about the history and start thinking about the future, Polish future, what can be done also with respect to the data economy. The second point that we raised was to start informing our society what data economy is, because in Poland absolutely there's no discussion about this issue, so there's a lot to be said, starting from the beginning, from the basics. Does it work? Yeah. And then move on with other points that were discussed during the last 2 days. So actually in Poland there's a lot to do about this issue.
Barbara?
Thank you. I review myself in your words. In Portugal, there's a lot to do about this. We are only starting. As far as Gulbenkian is mainly focused on art, education, science, and beneficency. Focus on sustainability and cohesion. So what I will try to do, because it was recently created a forum for the debate and reflection of future issues, I will try to really to put this into that agenda so that we can move it forward from there.
Thank you. Filippo?
Okay, basically we will do two main things, I think. The first one is to study what Sitra has developed in this last month, last years. As mentioned, there are some pilot projects about fair data economy, and Compagnia di San Paolo in these 2 days has proposed a very specific and practical project, and we have received some really useful suggestions by our colleagues in Finland. So it would be the first thing to do, to study the activities in Finland, the healthcare platform system that share data among private and public institutions. And the second element that is really important also is that, following the suggestion of the paper by Lisbon Council and Sitra, is to try to translate in the non-profit sector and to transmit the message of the fair data economy inside Italy and inside our activities.
Aart?
Yeah. In Bertelsmann Stiftung, we work as an operative think tank. That means that I came here to learn, and then also to connect, and then also to transfer. So learn, connect, and transfer. This is our working way of working. And what I want to do, what I take home, is that I plug in the results of all this in 3 specific projects. One is how to unleash the potential of the European digital market, and this is huge, and we should not be afraid of digitalization. We should shape it and benefit from it. And the second project is the ethics of algorithm, where we ask ourselves what kind of guidelines, what kind of institutions, what kind of principles should there be. So we plug it in there, and then the third project would be the future of work, where we plug it in. But I also hope that those who see us in the live stream would react on what we do, so that we have even more input. There is the hashtag VED 2019, where you can all send in your comments. And on the 10th of April, look at the website of Sitra to see that paper of Sitra and the Lisbon Council, which is rich and full of ideas. So we look forward to these reactions, and one specific action I already discussed with Sebastien, we should do, as a Vision Europe group, we should do within maybe a few months, somewhere maybe in Paris, a session where we collect the best practices of this reinforcement of of the consent rights, so to say. So if we collect best practices from over Europe, and if we see what is worth maybe to recommend, or what could be copied, what could be scaled up, what works, what functioned, what doesn't function. And we are, as we sit here, we are in a position to do that. And we can invite also others. So if there are who have best practices, send them into the VED 2019 hashtag, or hashtag VED 2019.
Sebastien?
To connect our discussion here to the work we are doing at the Institut Jacques Delors, I would see two possibilities. First one is, as you know, Jacques Delors Institute is in Paris, and there is a Jacques Delors Institute in Berlin, and we collaborate together. And one of our areas, of course, is what's going to happen after the European election and what will be on the agenda of the future Commission. And we are planning of publishing series and even also trying to train the future MEPs on this. So I think we definitely have this is one important chapter of we will be pushing for the next legislature and for the next commission to act on. So this is our first duty we will do. And the other aspect, we at the Jacques Delors Institute, we have a training program for young people who are not really very accurate in terms of EU affairs, but they come from various backgrounds from all over the country and even from other European countries. It's called l'Académie Notre Europe. And perhaps we could also, in this program, add a part of it could be also on raising awareness on the data economy.
Thank you. So we have this all on video, which means we have accountability. And this gives us a chance in a few months to come back, review the video, and see if you guys actually acted on all of these things you promised to do. So you better watch out. I like Aart's point about Twitter. I am now refreshing my Twitter feed every 2 seconds. So if I see any fascinating questions, either from the audience here or from the live stream, I'll find a way to work them in. But before we move on to the next question, Jaana, last but not least, what are you going to do here in Helsinki as a result of this dialogue? And I know you've already had some pretty impressive plans in the works, which you might want to share with the audience, but have you also taken away any new action points from this day here?
Yes, this IHAN is not just the technical ability to connect the person ID and data IDs and move data. I see this as my team of 20 people working, the dedicated people working on a theme. So I see the IHAN project as a very well-structured network of the networks. So this dialogue concept provided me quite many new ideas that we will start working on. And the governance models, browsing through, making inventory on different governance models, that's one of the steps we are now starting to do more closely. And I really like the idea of data unions as a part of the data governance structures and engaging citizens to be active actors there as well. And this idea, the whole idea about platform workers, data as a professional asset, those are very interesting things and points we haven't had time to consider through yet. So many new, well, lots more to work to do, but also many good ideas.
Thank you. Let me add my own takeaway and my own maybe action point, which is, this may sound simplistic, but just talking about the fair data economy and using phrases like a fair data economy, an ethical data economy, is an incredibly important first step, because at the end of the day, what we've all recognized is that regulation alone, laws alone won't get us there. We need to use markets. We need to use consumer behavior. And we need to tell ourselves, consumers and companies, that yes, it is reasonable to have more than just commercial expectations of the business models. It is reasonable to expect that people can be in control of their data, and that we hold ourselves and the new technologies, the new companies, the new business models we're developing to some amount of ethical standards. And just using those words puts that thought in our mind and reminds the product manager, reminds the CEO that he or she should aim higher. Now, I want to pivot for a moment from a discussion on substance and the goals of a fair data economy to look a little bit more introspectively at this discussion that we've had for the last day. Part of the value of the Vision Europe dialogue is it brings together think tanks from across Europe. And one of the things we clearly should be pioneering on is how to think tank well, how to actually do this active thinking and discussion in a better way. And Sitra has put on the table today, today and yesterday, a fairly new approach to how we can hold those discussions. And Jaana, if I could ask you maybe in 30 seconds to really quickly summarize what this dialogue approach has been about. And then I'd like to ask our panelists, what did you think of it? And what can we do to propagate this idea, maybe improve it, to iterate on it, to make it better? Because I think we always all need to be on the lookout for ways to have more open, more inclusive, but also more outcome-oriented discussions.
The biggest learning from the dialogue method has been trust on the process. So I think there was some confusion in the beginning. What's the goal for this kind of working? But I think we've got very practical results in the end.
And what was the dialogue process, just so I can ask for the people who didn't participate in it, because it's been Chatham House these 2 days?
So there were actually small groups using meeting each other and discussing on chosen topics, just discussing, not trying to conclude anything, but discussing. So, and then summarizing those ideas.
And I understand you're going to produce an additional small paper with some of the specific discussion ideas from these last 2 days?
Yes, a summary paper will be.
Excellent. So, Scott, we're going to start with you.
Good. Well, it's been a really interesting process. I have to say, for me, a couple of the particular strengths that I've perceived. On the one hand, it's really nice to get out of the Brussels bubble on occasion. Here we're dealing with a very wide range of really smart people from a wide range of different walks of life, different professional training backgrounds. So it's been a very fruitful, a very rich exchange. In terms of opportunities for improvement, I think my perception would be that trying to cover the entire data economy in this way is really a little too much, made it very hard to extract lessons, and that trying to summarize results from such a wide range of discussions was challenging, I think, for the organizers. I have to say the illustrator here did a magnificent job, a truly magnificent job.
Can we show it there so that it is in the video? Maybe the synthesis one.
There we go. The illustrator seems to be at work right now. Yes.
Aha. Good. Well, while we wait for her, I guess what I would say, though, is, oh, there we go. So look at that. Wow. Okay, but I would say in terms of takeaways for the future, I think either trying to cover a somewhat narrower scope or trying to have more structure going in would help, because it seems to me that with the summaries, inevitably, an awful lot gets lost in the summaries. I think a slightly more targeted format might be good, but somehow preserving this notion of a really wide range of participants and small group discussions where you can have a much more detailed and in-depth and open and Chatham Housey kind of approach. So with that,
Thomas, you always have the burden of coming from an organization that has a discussion format named after it.
Great piece of marketing, whoever came up with it originally for Chatham House. No, I've really enjoyed the last couple of days, and I've been involved in the Vision Europe process for basically since the outset. And so this is a sort of an evolution from where we started, and I think it's been really positive. In the past, we've done some very successful kind of larger conferences with more people and sort of more of a divide between panel and audience. And in a way, what I've really enjoyed about this is that divide doesn't really exist. And everyone's been able to sort of take part in these smaller form dialogues, which I think have had to just give a space for really meaningful discussion and interaction. So I know it takes a great deal of work to also think about how to structure and organize that. So I think we should probably pay tribute to all the Sitra team and all the effort that they put in structuring everything too, because it takes a lot of work. Yeah, so applause there. That was it.
So I completely agree with previous speakers. So the first point is the organization of such a dialogue process is a challenge, and I think that the organizers, they took a lot of effort for them to prepare that. Secondly, when I heard about the structure, how it would look like, I was a little bit scared, because I thought, wow, where's the structure? Yes, where is the beginning? Where is the content, and then the summary, the end. So, but now when I see that you let the ideas flow, I think that you will also have a lot of work after the event to summarize that and to bring the conclusions to your paper. So I think that the conclusions will be left to the organizers. Another thing that I really enjoyed was the active participation. So you didn't let us be passive. We had to stay active and contribute all the time during the whole day. So I ended my day with a headache, and not because of wine, but because of the fact that I had to think and to contribute to every single panel. So I really think that it's a very good process and to elaborate further.
I agree with all the. I'm going to be repetitive. I don't think with the traditional format we could have covered so much subtopics as we covered in this new format. I think that's and I really enjoy the process. I'm overwhelmed with information in a good sense. For the future, I would maybe try and choose a subtopic more focused, as it was said before.
Excellent.
Okay, my colleagues already told what I am thinking. 2 points: a great informal atmosphere that help us the movement of ideas and confrontation. It was really good, but it was also really challenging because we are from different different professionals, and even if we are talking about data, it's not so obvious to create connection, for instance, between lawyers and data scientists. So it was really useful, but also really challenging.
Yeah, I like the new format of the Vision Europe dialogue. What I liked about the dialogue, and first I thought, dialogue, I know what it is, but I did not know. And actually I learned what is a dialogue. That is a session where you do not try to conclude or to decide, but it is a session where you are all participating to learn. Okay. So to learn, you have to listen, and then you can build with your own idea on what you heard before. And if that is well facilitated, after a little while, you see a kind of an extrapolation and accumulated dividend of such a discussion, because it is not a contest, it is not a debate, it's a dialogue. And therefore, we had a very rich and learning experience. Now, I think that this format very well fits with what are we here for? Why are these 8 think tanks and foundations together? Why did we invite also other experts? 60 of the best and brilliant kluge Köpfe, würde ich sagen auf Deutsch. So the best and the brilliant minds to speak about this. This is because we wanted to learn and to get new ideas. And this richness, the rich result, the rich earning, only in 24 hours would not have been possible in any other format. So from now on, we are not calling ourselves anymore the Vision Europe group or consortium. We call ourselves the Vision Europe Dialogue.
Sebastian?
I fully agree with what Aart just said. It was a genuine dialogue, and when we talk about fair data, I thought it was a fair discussion in the sense that everyone had his say. We all agreed the ground rules that were on the floor were always respected. No one tried to win over the other, and I think that also helped in facilitating a real dialogue. I would also call it a post-it discussion, because one thing I actually enjoyed and was not expecting is that because we're talking about data and high technology, it was a very pencil, paper, and post-it discussion, and in that sense a very human dialogue, and I think that really helped. Also, I enjoyed not only being perhaps out of the Brussels bubble, but also being 48 hours out of Twitter or out of any other social networks, and really rediscovering actually the very genuine dialogue. Yeah.
So I have a question on Twitter from Antti Poikkola. Are you coming to the My Day the 2019 conference in Helsinki on September 25th to 27th to continue this discussion? And I'm just going to ask for a show of hands for the two groups, either those who know they're already coming as the first group, and those who don't yet know they're coming, but they probably will. So those who already know they're coming, I'm coming, Jaana's here. It's during the Finnish presidency, guys. Get a commitment on camera. Well, I guess our other panelists just don't know they're coming yet. Antti, you have your convincing work cut out for you. Now, I appreciate everyone's beautiful comments on the need for dialogue and listening to each other. But let's be honest. The bread and butter of think tanks is telling other people what to do. And I think it would be cruel of me as a panelist if I didn't give the assembled think tankers here the chance to tell the upcoming Finnish presidency of the EU, as well as more broadly, the legislators and the policymakers of the next 5 years, a new European Commission, a new European Parliament, what they should be doing, what they should be working on. So I ask each of you, staccato 1 point, either for the Finns, or the next Commission, or the next Parliament, or really anyone else. If you want to direct your suggestion or your imperative to a company, go ahead and do that. 1 action point for somebody else. And Sebastien, I'm going to put you on the spot right now. Boom, like the good think tanker you are.
Well, this is we had a lot of collective intelligence throughout those 2 days. This is more an individual answer, but with the upcoming Finnish presidency, I know that security is one of the priorities of this presidency, and there is a security aspect to all of our discussion here about when it comes to data protection, and it's also a geopolitical issue. We didn't perhaps talk much, but when we are in a world where these matters have to be dealt also and thought of as at a geopolitical dimension, which is linked to security. So that will be my push, that the Finnish presidency looks at this issue of data also on a security reason.
Aart?
Yeah, I would say that the Finnish should put on the agenda to celebrate the fact that GDPR is there, but also to put on the agenda how to make sure that the rules are supervised and implemented, or implemented and supervised. And the second thing the Finns should put on the agenda is, okay, Europe, we have to not to be afraid or to watch to the US or China. We have to make our own model on how do we shape digitalization. And for that model, we have to get our act together and then cooperate with the US, whatever president there may be. Last thing, we as Vision Europe, whatever UK may decide, we keep Chatham House in our group.
Bravo. Filippo?
Well, I think that Finnish should invest and continue to work on the fair data economy. I've read carefully the paper. It's ambitious, but it's really powerful. The virtuous circle with users, data, and providers. So it's really ambitious, but it could really change the things, both in the private sector and the public sector. So this is my suggestion.
My suggestion, well, first, to try and put this in the national agenda, because it's not there yet. And that's the way...
Every national agenda in Europe?
Sorry?
Every national agenda in Europe?
As well, probably, yeah.
Makes sense, mainstream.
Yeah, why not? And the second thing is celebrating the GDPR, but also not undertaking the risks of more regulation, but monitoring, evaluating and correcting the existing one.
Okay, so I will repeat what Aart said, because this is what I wanted to say. So just put on the agenda the innovation, data economy in your own way.
Thanks. I would say, we've talked a lot about dialogue, and we started in a way with the conversation yesterday about the international context, and there was a discussion about Europe as a regulatory superpower. So I would sort of build on Aart's point and suggest that what we need is a dialogue between the United States and Europe about these questions. And I guess that has to build on Europe having a strong sense, building on the GDPR principles and implementation, but a strong sense of its own model, and then a process of the kind of dialogue in a way that we've had with the United States, which maybe starts in a slightly different place. And I'll leave any other Brexit-related comments.
Okay, well, I'd like to come back to this issue about digitalization of Europe, because I think it's really important. It's important for strengthening the European economy. It's important for strengthening European competitiveness. And I'd really like to flag several different elements there. One certainly is simply ensuring that we have sufficient public investment in this constellation of technologies. It's artificial intelligence, it's machine learning, it's big data. They're really mutually complementary technologies. If we look at the size of the chips that are being laid down in the United States and in China, we need to make sure that we're comparable. But it's actually more than that, too. We have historic challenges in Europe. We tend to be much more banking focused than our North American trading partners and competitors, not enough capital market focused. The European Union has had capital markets union measures on the plate for years. They aren't moving very quickly. Generally strengthening venture capital such that we can move innovative companies from startups through the scale-up phase and into the next one. That's a real challenge. Entrepreneurial culture is something that has to be promoted. Some of that really lies on the entrepreneurs, but some of it is also public policy. For example, the fact that we have very different bankruptcy laws in different countries in the European Union, some of which are onerous and tie up capital and also tie up entrepreneurs for long periods of time. I mean, in North America, you can hear that I was born in the United States. In North America, it's often the serial entrepreneurs that really drive progress. So there are many steps for public policy to promote this kind of innovation, and I think we need to really be getting with the program.
Jaana, last but not least, as our hosts.
Okay. So I think for this fair data economy, there's a very good national alignment. So I'll promise that we will keep listening to you very carefully, and then I promise to be very loud on the topic of fair data economy while different media outcomes during the presidency. So.
Good. Well, maybe as a closing thought, what I'd like to share from my own experience having worked with Sitra on this paper over the last half year, and the paper is going to be released, as noted, on the 10th of April, and then there will be a proper launch here in Helsinki on the 8th of May, is what will follow, which is a broader discussion. And Sitra is a really impressive organization because you take a real long-term view. And you don't simply ask the question, well, how could we have a good paper or a good discussion? You ask, how can we, over multiple years, articulate a process and a program for change? And so it's been really inspiring for me to work with you. I encourage everyone to stay tuned, because this discussion today, the paper, the launch in Helsinki, those aren't the end. Those are the beginning of the discussion. There's a lot to do in the next half year under the Finnish presidency, and indeed during the next 5 years. I think Europe has learned a lot about the digital economy with its digital single market program in the last 5 years. And I'm looking forward and I'm excited about what we can do the next time around with all the lessons that we've learned. So I'd like to thank the audience for tuning in today. I'd like to thank our panelists and all of the participants in this dialogue. It's been a useful, an enlightening discussion for me, and I hope for everyone. And I wish everyone safe travels either back to your internet browser or back home from Helsinki. Thank you.